Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. This is your DC Spotlight for the week of February 21st, 2023, as we march along in this year of comics. And yeah, Rocky and I were just talking before we started recording. Pretty strong week from DC. A couple of fantastic books, a couple of fantastic moments. So overall, it was good. And that's a good thing because I really do feel like the big two, they're losing ground. I mean, we've talked about it before. They're losing ground to independent stuff, which is good, you know, that we're getting a diversity of stories and what have you. But man, I was just doing my pre-order for the month of April, I guess it is, over the weekend. And never have the big two felt so homogenized, right? So directionless.
Yeah.
They're just like throwing up generic stories. We'll talk about it when we talk about Lazarus Planet a little bit. With all these events and the way they're structured now, man, the big two, if they don't, I don't know what they need. It's almost like they need a new person in charge to bring some fresh energy. They need a shakeup, I would say. And I say that saying that, yeah, this was a good week for DC, a lot of great stories. And these are characters we love and we're invested in them when we want to read good stories about them. But in terms of something that's really new and fresh and groundbreaking, it's a little too far, you know, it's a little too far in between. Like, it's a little too rare to get a moment where you're just like, holy crap. We did have one of those moments for me this week, though. We'll definitely talk about it. But anyway, what do you think, Rocky? Pretty solid week, right?
Well, generally speaking, it's a solid week because I was happy with World's Finest, Superman, Clayface, and Flash again, and GCPD, the Blue Wall. I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed Catwoman and Black Adam. But the Nightwing was a little bit of a downer to me, and Wonder Woman and Space Age was a little disappointing. But still, the vast majority I enjoyed this week. But and I do agree with you overall that on my pull list as well, I will just quickly add that I also find that I no longer collect any Marvel for the first time in, that's got to be 30 years. Like I don't collect no Marvel anymore. I stopped, Daredevil was the last one, and I stopped collecting that about 6 months ago. And so no Marvel, and I still collect DC, but the vast majority is independent, and I'm starting to enjoy. Frankly, the best stories I'm reading are all independent. I have to say, and occasionally here we'll get some really stories that the best stories are the ones that no one's reading, like JCPD, The Blue Wall, and I enjoyed Clayface. But thank God for Mark Waid and some inspiration by Joshua Williamson from time to time, and Jeremy Adams. They're still passionate writers out there, but and I'll give Tom Taylor some cred too. So, but we'll see. We'll get into it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's kick it off with Batman One Bad Day Clayface, continuing these One Bad Day one-shots. This one's written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing. Zermanico is the artist, Romulo Fajardo Jr. on colors, Tom Napolitano on letters. Some great covers here. The Jim Lee cover, obviously Jim Lee, Batman, Clayface, it's fantastic. The Brian Boland cover was interesting. Clayface, almost body horror, I guess you'd say. But what I really loved about this, so this writing duo, if you're not familiar, they've been around for a while. I feel like they're finally coming into their own. They're finally getting their due. For a long time with DC, they were a writing duo that would be put on a book that was canceled. So this book's canceled. It's going to run out 3 more issues. Let's throw these guys on there and let them finish it out. And that was kind of their thing, what they were known for. But they put in their dues, and obviously they were pitching on, series they wanted to develop and be on for long runs, all during this time. But they could be counted on to show up for a fill-in issue or a fill-in arc. And, it's a good lesson in, when you're trying to break in, say yes, right? Like if an editor asks you, can you do this? Can you do that? Just say yes. Figure it out as you go along. And it's not just comics, right? Like they're a writing team, and they've pitched stories around Hollywood for movies and television shows and all that kind of stuff. And so I say all that to say they're coming at this Batman Clayface One Bad Day story with experience, right? Basil Carlo, Clayface himself, frustrated actor, never, got the break he felt he deserved. And when Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly tell this story, they're coming at it from their own experience, from their own perspective, right? Of going around Hollywood and, getting in the door and passing one test only to be failed at passed on to the next person, and then that person fails you. And the next time, maybe you take one more step and then that person fails you. And it's always one more thing, right? Like it's always, well, we need you to do this. And then you do that. Well, now we need you to do this. And it's never ending, right? And it's this treadmill. It's this wall that you can never break through. Every time you take a step forward and you think you've reached the finish line, they move the goalpost, whatever analogy you want to use. But these guys are coming at it from real world experience, having lived through this. And when they were on the show a few months ago talking about their Star Trek series over at IDW, they mentioned this book and about how this was kind of cathartic for them to really put everything they'd been through with Hollywood for the last decade into a story. And they've done a fantastic job. You really get this sense of frustration. Not that you justify what Clayface does here when he kills innocent people. He's doing wrong, and you condemn him for that. But you understand his motivation. And that's, I think, where Kelly and Lansing have done a fantastic job with the story. Like, you understand with everything Clayface has gone through back in Gotham City and him leaving that behind to go out to Hollywood and restart his acting career. He wants it to work. His heart's in the right place. But, once he starts getting rejected, he immediately crosses the line, right? He falls back into those supervillain tendencies. And it just really, really works. I thought the art by Zermanico was fantastic. The colors by Fajardo Jr. were done really, really well. And one thing I'll say about this, probably for the first time since the first Batman One Day story we had, which was the Riddler story from King and Garrett's, this is the most compelling read, right? Like, that one was a real page turner with Riddler. You wanted to see what was going to happen. Not that the others in between have been bad, but this was the first time since that initial one with Riddler where, like, before I knew it, it was over. Like, the narrative, the momentum that the narrative, the structure, the story structure that the writers use, it really propels the story forward, and it's over before you know it. And you're like, wow, that was really, really good. So I really enjoyed it. For me, this is probably the second best one after the Riddler. So what were your thoughts?
Oh, I love this one, and this has got to be probably one of the best Clayface stories I've ever read, and I can't believe Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing wrote it. I got to be honest, because I often find that their writing it's a little bit generic. It's never really blown me away. They're usually a creative team that's called in at the last minute to finish a book. When a big writer goes off a book and just before a book gets canceled, they put Lansing and Kelly on it. And I almost felt kind of sorry for them in a way. And it's really nice to see them sort of, I listened to your interview. I'm glad to see they're having success at IDW Star Trek comics. But this here.
And not to interrupt, but I will also say, I know you're not reading any Marvel right now. Their Captain America run right now is fantastic as well. And again, it shows when they're not having to come in and pinch hit, like you said, to finish off a series, when they get to run with their own ideas, their work's fantastic. Well,
I got to tell you then, having said that, I probably maybe I should be checking out my digital copies of Captain America. I'll probably do that based on that recommendation. I will. Because based on this, I'm very impressed. I absolutely love how they, one of the central complaints that we've had with Batman One Bad Day as a general concept is that, with the exception of the Riddler story about Tom King, which was my favorite so far, and yours as well, is that it seems like the writers didn't really understand that they weren't given the same homework assignment, so to speak, that, it was supposed to be like one bad day, just Killing Joke was. Like, what was almost like the final, what would be the final Clayface story, the final Bane story, and not all of them really seem to perform. But this is one where it's, what's amazing about this is that Clayface, of course, is Basil Carlo. He's an actor. He's a failed actor, but he goes to Hollywood and he tries out for the part of the Joker in the movie. They're actually filming the movie A Killing Joke. and and he tries out for the role of the person that would become the Joker. He's actually trying out for the role in the Killing Joke movie, and he ends up, and it's in his conversations first with his agent. And his agent tells him, well, you do good, just do your best. And then he goes, he tries out for the role. The director tells him, well, they need him, they want him to, they have some issues with how he's performing it. But the problem with Basil Karlo is that he's always looking for feedback. And when they give him feedback that he doesn't like, he thinks that they're wrong. Unfortunately, he ends up killing everyone here. And in fact, one of the covers that actually is symbolic of this story, the alternate cover is the one that looks like a movie poster that says Basil Karlo is Clayface in Batman One Bad Day with Basil Karlo, and introducing Basil Karlo, producer, Basil Karlo, director, Basil Karlo. Like, all the actors are Clayface, because he literally, anyone that would be part of this movie, they're not good enough because they're not Basil Karlo. And that's ultimately the problem here. And it's all wrapped up so beautifully because it's literally Basil Karlo frustrated with Hollywood. And you see the ups and downs through the various characters that are introduced. We're introduced to his agent. We're introduced to two of his friends, Corey, who gets the role of the Joker over him, and he ends up killing his own friend. And then he meets another woman by the name of Kat. She's a scriptwriter. These are all up-and-coming young actors, young Hollywood future stars who are doing their best to make it in Hollywood, and Basil Karlo befriends them. And, of course, you don't really realize it until the end as the story moves forward, as you get to know these people and as their lives are taken by Basil. There's a sense of tragedy to it. And what I love about this is that it's, among many things, is that ultimately he ends up taking over the identity of a Hollywood producer, and he has a party in this producer's home, and he invites his two friends, and Bruce Wayne, of all people, shows up at the party. And of course, you know why Bruce Wayne must be there, because Bruce Wayne's on the trail of Clayface. And the way it all plays out is ultimately Batman has to take Clayface down. And as he says to him, you killed 9 people in one day. Like 9 people in one day. And he, as Batman says to him, he says, it was their story, Basil. You're just acting. And that's the tragedy of Clayface. And that's what drives home here. And particularly at the end where Clayface is in prison, and all he can do is think about an imaginary conversation that he's having about how he's asking for feedback. Give me some feedback, because he thinks he's such a good actor. But the irony is that he's one of those people that you can't give feedback to, because if you give him the wrong kind of feedback, he'll literally kill you. That's Clayface. That's the extent of his dysfunction and his mental, his state of mind. And I thought this perfectly encapsulated the psychic, the mental illness, whatever the hell it is, the psychopathy of Clayface. This encapsulates his character perfectly. In many ways, this is almost like an origin for him, even though it's not. But it highlights all the flaws of Clayface that make him the tragic and truly deadly and horrifying character that he is. And this just works so well. I'm almost tempted. You know what? I could almost put this on par with Tom King's Riddler, Batman One Mad Day. That's how good I think this one is. And I think that, I'm impressed. I'm still sort of processing it, because I read it like 3 times, and I'm just like, I got more impressed every time I read it. But no, very, very good. I would give it a solid 9 out of 10. I love this.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely the best Clayface story I've ever read. Kelly and Lansing demonstrate a understanding of who Basil Karlo is better than anybody else. Like, it was what Tynan did in the DC detective run was okay. These Batman team was not interesting. I think this worked even better than that.
Okay, I'm not.
All right. So let's move on. Lazarus Planet Omega Number 1 is up next from writer Mark Waid. Ricardo Federici and Mike Perkins are the artists. We have Brad Anderson on colors, Steve Wands on letters. I don't know exactly how to rate this one, right? Like, is it a satisfying ending? Yes, I think it's a satisfying ending. Does it wrap up the story? Does it answer the questions? Yes, it does. The problems I have with this are more kind of systemic of the way DC is structuring their events now. They've done it maybe since Dark Knight's Death Metal started. They started doing this thing where it's a limited number of issues for the main series or spine series or whatever you want to call it. And then they make all these series of one shots and, 1 or 2, 3 issue miniseries, what have you. I wish they would stop doing that. Right. And I get why they do, because you don't have to buy everything to get this whole story. And a lot of times the one shots or the little minis are anthologies, and they're giving other creators that don't have that much experience a chance to dip their toe into the DC universe and kind of show editors what they can, how can they tie in, how can they work with others, how can they meet a deadline and all that stuff. And I get that there's worth for that, but the worth in that is for the creators that are proving themselves at DC, and for the editorial staff at DC to, vet these aspiring comic book creators and see, how they do. The worth for us as readers, it leaves a little bit to be desired, because it ends up feeling so disjointed. Like we have talked throughout, and Rocky was so excited for Lazarus Planet, and we talked throughout about how kind of disappointing and unnecessary a lot of these tie-ins have been, and how you just don't need to read them to get the whole story. So here we have supposedly the end of the story, like the resolution, right? Except not really, because there's still some loose ends to be tied up in Monkey Prince and what have you. And there's still some of the other tie-in series that haven't had their last issues yet. So I question the timing of this coming now as opposed to coming later. But it ends up feeling like all you really need to read if you want to know what's going on with Lazarus Planet is Lazarus Planet Alpha and Lazarus Planet Omega. For the most part, I'd say 80 to 90% of the story.
Yeah. Well, it ends in Batman and Robin #5 at the end of this. It says,
right.
So it's
yeah. So and then there's the Monkey Prince part, and it says, Monkey Prince #12 for that. So
yeah.
So again, you're getting 80 to 90% of the story in these 2 issues. But yet, if you want to have more context and a richer, fuller story, you do need to read some of the other stuff. It does bring in, that other 10%. But again, we're talking about what, 20, 30 other issues of comics, probably closer to 20 than 30, that's bringing in the other 10%. So when you think about story value and, value for your comic dollar, that's not a great percentage, right? You're getting 80 to 90% of the story in Lazarus Planet Alpha and Omega. You're getting the other 10% of story in all the rest. So what I'm saying is, don't structure it this way. Make Lazarus Planet Omega a 6-issue series. Take the flavor and context and some of the great ideas that are in some of those other miniseries and one-shots and incorporate them into that 6-issue Lazarus Planet series overall, and give us 100% in 6 issues without having to tie in. If you want to cross over into, the main Superman title or the main Batman title or what have you, you can do that. This is the way events used to be. And, not to sound like, get off my lawn or whatever, but I'm having a hard time with the way these things are structured now, because it feels like we get a lot of fluff and a lot of unnecessary stories that are only tangentially related. Like I think Rocky mentioned it last episode or the episode before, where literally we had a story. It might've been the Harley Quinn story, where literally the only tie-in was the sky was green, right? And there was green rain falling. Or maybe it was last week when we did the Huntress story, where she's battling through Arkham Tower. Because some green rain drops in on some unknown cell down in the basement. When we get to the end of the story, it's like and again, Crisis on Infinite Earths was the first big mega crossover where some of those tie-ins way back when it was a panel or two where the sky was red, and that was the tie-in. They got the Crisis trade dress, so it's not a new problem necessarily, but it's gotten really bad lately, and I didn't especially care for the way that this has been structured. As far as the story itself, I mean, again, it's sort of a paint by numbers generic story with King Fireball and Monkey Prince and what have you. I will say, as much as I've been enjoying the Monkey Prince series itself, I kind of enjoyed Monkey Prince here in the hands of Mark Waid and with the Federici art, because he doesn't feel so much like the sort of wacky, crazy, juvenile type hero that we've gotten in his own series. He comes across as a little more sane, a little more serious, a little more mature as a hero in this. And it shows the potential that character has, which I really, really enjoyed. So I thought that was fantastic. I thought the art by Federici was fantastic. And then there is the backup story that's giving us some more of the history of King Fireball and Nezhan, what have you. And so that backup story is by a lot of the same creative team you have on the Monkey Prince series, with writer Jean Luen Yang, Sebastian Cheng on colors. It is Billy Tan doing the line work and Seda Temofonte on letters. But that helps add some context as well. So yeah, as much as I don't care for the way things are structured, I do feel like the actual Lazarus Planet Alpha and actual Lazarus Planet Omega, where you get, like I said, 80 to 90% of the story, I actually enjoyed them more than I expected to. Because there's not that they're not good stories or it's not an interesting event. It was a little more straightforward than I expected to be. Usually when it comes to magic, the thing that I don't like about it, I've said this before, is how a writer can, write himself into a corner or, set things up a certain way where you think the heroes are going to lose and there's no way out of it. And then they just snap their fingers or have the perfect spell at the perfect time. And it doesn't feel earned, right? That's not the case here. And I give credit to Mark Waid, the writer, for making it feel like the win was earned. And even though the heroes won, basically, it wasn't a clean win, and there's going to be consequences to come. So, yeah, I mean, for me, the Mark Waid writing and getting that sense of stakes across, and the Federici art, which I know he doesn't do a lot of interior work because his stuff's so gorgeous and detailed, it probably takes him too long. But yeah, there were some scenes here that were just fantastic. I really especially love, there's a full page splash of Zatanna, like weaving these spells, and she's looking all beautiful and powerful and sexy. And Alan Scott's in the background holding his lantern. And man, I just love that page. So anyway, overall, I thought this was a decent book, better than average, and I will say the event was probably a bit above average for me, but I got to give DC an F on the structure of this event. Stop structuring events like this. It doesn't work. There's too much fluff. It's not working. You need to do it differently. I can't imagine it selling that well. Like who's going, oh, I got to buy every Lazarus. So with only a bookend, right? Lazarus Planet Alpha and Omega, who is sucked in so much from Alpha that they go, oh, I got to buy every Lazarus. You're not even giving people a chance to get invested in the story, because the main series is only 2 issues, 2 one-shots. I don't care for it at all. So anyway, I'll stop ranting and let you give us your thoughts.
Well, from a storytelling point of view, if Lazarus Planet would have actually been a story that chronologically made sense, it would be okay. If it went, Lazarus Planet Alpha was a really good opening issue. I thought that was good. You didn't really need to know much about what had come before. It was adequately explained. And you could go from Lazarus Alpha right into this Lazarus Omega, and you basically get an ending or a defeat of the Devil Nezha. And it at least it tells you can go to Batman and Robin 5 and then Monkey Prince 12. But still, it is a little bit disjointed. I agree that bloody hell we shouldn't be led that astray and be led all over the place. These are inexcusable mistakes. I mean, they've had plenty of time to get their act together. They've had frankly, I think editorially, DC's had a very bad last few years. And this is just not a sign that things are getting any better. And frankly, if you went from Lazarus Alpha and you love the story in Lazarus Alpha, and then you jump to Dark Fate and then Assault on Krypton, and then you would discover, I mean, it started characters that you have no idea who they are. They're not connected at all to the story other than through Lazarus' reign. Not particularly well written. The art was phoned in a lot of them, in my opinion. This was not DC's best, and this is supposed to be an event. And this, frankly, now it's really good. Lazarus Alpha and Lazarus Omega. I enjoyed the story here. I really love and I love the art. I mean, it's good. The story go from Alpha to Omega to Batman and Robin, which I've already read, and Monkey Prince. This does wrap up well. This is a decent story. But God, when you collect this as a trade, DC, please do not put any of the garbage of the Dark Fate and the Assault on Krypton in it. Just collect Alpha, Omega, Batman and Robin 5, and Monkey Prince 12. That's it. Don't put any of the other hogwash garbage in it. And it's garbage. Just let it die. Just let it go by the wayside. That's my opinion. But anyways, this story, I haven't even talked about the story yet. It's fun. It's basically Black Alice getting her act together. Great moments between Black Alice and Monkey Prince as she sort of comes into her own and finds her inner strength to overcome the manipulations of the Devil Nessa. And the Spectre, she reignites or revitalizes the power of the Spectre to help defeat the Devil Nessa. Meanwhile, there's all kinds of power shenanigans that are going on where the heroes are deprived of their powers and then get each other's powers because magic is gone completely chaotically insane. And so there's all kinds of insane things that are happening, and the art is truly fantastic. And as you pointed out, a gorgeous picture of Zatanna. So I want to focusing on the story here. I did enjoy this story, and the only thing that tainted the story was the garbage that came before it. And I'm not talking about the Alpha comic, which was awesome. I had to openly try to ignore all the other irrelevant issues, and that's the sad part. But I am looking forward to how, people who've just picked up Alpha and then jumped to Omega, you'll really enjoy this story. If you were unfortunately wasted your time and money and read the issues in between, you might skip this one because you're on a budget. And unfortunately, that would be wrong because this is actually the one that you'd want to get. Go from Alpha to Omega. The in-betweens were wrong. Shame on DC editorial for getting it right, but kudos to the creative team for getting it right. And and this does elevate Monkey Prince. And I think this should have been completely marketed 100% differently, frankly. This could have put Monkey Prince even more on the map. I think it does already. This is really a Monkey Prince kind of event. And it should have just been marketed differently. It should have been structured differently, as you said, whether it's a 6-issue series or whatever. But the way they did it was just not very well done. But story-wise, the story proper, the story that actually deals with it, I think is worth reading. And the story of Monkey Prince, I encourage people to go pick up and read the 12 issues of Monkey Prince, and certainly issues. This continues into Batman Robin number 5 and Monkey Prince number 12. And I think it's worth reading. Not the corollary, garbage, Dark Fate, Assault on Krypton nonsense, but Alpha, Omega, Batman and Robin 5, and Monkey Prince 12, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. And it's too bad. I'm not discounting any of the hard work that anybody put in those other tie-ins, but it's just not necessary. It's just not necessary. I mean, the DC is putting out, and we've talked about this before, right? Like I used to complain, hey, do more anthologies, give other creators a chance. They're doing that, but it's almost like they're trying to make up for lost time. The pendulum has swung too far the other way. There's too many anthologies now, so too many backups and what have you. So anyway, let's move on. Up next, we have Superman Space Age from writer Mark Russell. This is issue number 3. Mike Allred is the artist. Laura Allred is the colorist. Dave Sharp on letters. This is almost like you can compare it to what Marvel was doing when they had those in the through the decades, the life story, they had Spider-Man life story, Fantastic Four life story. So the Superman space age supposedly happening in real time, covering decades. And from the beginning, Pariah has shown up and told Superman, yeah, your version of Earth is going to die. Nothing I can do to stop it. And he's referencing all the way back to the original Crisis on Infinite Earths with the Anti-Mod. So it's been an interesting take. Mark Russell giving us a little bit more of a realistic, what would supposedly be a realistic take on Superman and the Justice League with Mike Allred's art. Now, I'm not a fan of Allred's art. I love Mike Allred. He's such a nice guy. He's great with fans. He's very grateful, very humble, and he's got a great sense of storytelling. What I don't care for in his art is his line, where he uses a very, very heavy line. And for me, it just makes his images feel very, very static. Plus, he always draws the eyebrows and eyes like so heavy. Like everybody has these really thick eyebrows, and especially you can see it on a Pariah. Like he's got these giant black circles around his eyes, and it's off-putting to me. So while I think the visual storytelling is great, the actual line work for me just doesn't work. But Mark Russell's typical tongue-in-cheek sense of humor and sense of satire is here, and that works really, really well. And the Superman that Russell and Allred give us here is he's much closer to the Superman from like All-Star Superman, Grant Morrison, than like the traditional Superman you'd have in the regular DC books. And I do appreciate that. I do appreciate that they make him super smart, and he kind of takes himself at one point off the playing field, leaves the Justice League, and kind of uses his intellect to accomplish what he needs to accomplish. I won't spoil it. But I like that. I think that's really, really interesting. When he is off the stage, so to speak, it gives Batman a chance to step up. And I actually don't care for the visual look of Batman. It's a very distinctive look from Mike Allred. I just don't care for it. But it gives Batman a chance to sort of step up and almost be the star of the book for a little while. But I felt like what I think is supposed to be a very emotional scene with kind of the origin of this version of the Joker and a final confrontation with Bruce Wayne and Batman and the Joker. I think it's supposed to come across as very tragic and poignant, and it just felt so overwrought and overworked for me rather than like spontaneous or interesting. And I just did not care for that portion of the story at all. And for me, it brought this issue down, what I think would have been an above average issue, and pushed it to below average for me. I really disliked the Batman Joker portion of the story. And it has nothing to do with me being sick of Batman or being sick of Joker. It just, like I said, it felt so overwrought and heavy handed. And frankly, I come to expect better from Mark Russell. Usually I've never seen him do something like that, do something so cliched and just clumsy and clunky. So I thought that was unfortunate, because the rest of the story, the actual Superman portion of the story, when the Anti-Monitor does finally show up and this version of, or this portion of the DC multiverse being destroyed, and what this Superman does to preserve it, like I really, really enjoyed all of that. And again, even though this particular art style is not my favorite, I thought that it worked for the story that they were telling. And overall, I think that the Superman Space Age would probably be pretty well in a trade. But yeah, this was not my favorite of the three issues, mostly because of that Batman Joker, just that whole scene at the end, it just didn't work at all for me. I didn't care for it. So what were your thoughts on this?
Yeah. I actually, I'm going to give this. Before you started talking, it was funny because I was giving this a generally a positive review, in that I felt that at the end, the message of who Superman was did shine through at the end for me, the last half of this book. But I had to get back into it in the last probably half or third of it because the Batman portion did take me out. It was not necessary. It wasn't necessary at all. Even like it wasn't. I don't even think it kept. It wasn't even necessary for the theme. The entire, at least what resonated with me with the story was the sacrifice that Superman was making. Superman believes Pariah because from the very beginning of this story, Pariah keeps showing up in a bar in different decades, talking to Clark Kent, saying, "You know what? Your world's going to end. The universe is going to end. There's a crisis going on. Sooner or later, you know, your universe is nothing you can do about it. You're going to die." And he's even interacted with Brainiac, with a series of brainiacs, almost like a council of brainiacs. We're telling him, yeah, we can't stop the anti-monitor. Sooner or later, universe is going to die. And so Superman's been preparing for it, though, and he's creating a crystal. And much like the movie, and again, Mark Russell is borrowing probably from different plot points from various different stories about Superman. And Superman's basically incorporating all the DNA sequences on a quantum level of everyone on the planet, with the idea being that if the planet's destroyed, what will survive is this quantum matrix of all the DNA of all the human beings who lived just before they died, and they can live on another planet. And that's ultimately how it ends. So it was sort of predictable in that respect. But it's getting there that I did feel some moments. It did have some moments of emotion. It hit me more because I do like Mike Allward's art. I'm a fan of his art. I love his Mad Men. But in any event, I wish that I don't understand why there was that detour with Batman. It had nothing to do with the story. The sacrifice we saw of Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. We saw Jon Stewart step up to the plate here. I would have thought that a more appropriate person to maybe make a sacrifice would have been Wonder Woman instead of Batman. We saw lots of Batman. The Joker here was a strange iteration, and it felt like almost half of this book was focused on Batman. Why? It's called Superman Space Age. What on earth are you telling us a Joker story for with Batman? I don't understand. It was totally unnecessary. Absolutely has nothing to do with the end of the world and the message of the sacrifice that Superman makes. Who ultimately Superman chooses to stay in his universe. He's like the captain going down with the ship. Superman has the opportunity to take the Matrix and go to another universe and survive along with the DNA, which perfectly replicates all his family, all the people on Earth. But he chooses to stay and actually die. And ironically enough, Superman is the only one that dies because everyone else lives because of what he does with that Matrix by giving it to another Superman in another universe so that universe and his people can live on. And so I really, really enjoyed that ending and I thought that the ending was really good. And that ending, I think, not to speak for you, Jace, but that's where I got sort of like the All-Star Superman vibes, that was his sort of sacrifice. And so I'll give him credit for that because I did get some feels out of reading this. I won't lie. But I do admit that the Batman thing, some of it just took me out of the story. And even the first two issues, there were segments of story that were just not necessary. There was even some Lex Luthor moments that we just didn't really need to see, quite frankly. Although it was funny that Lex Luthor finally gets one up on Superman, and he finally becomes rich, and he manages to take over Wayne Industries after Batman dies, and then of course the world is ending, so it's all for naught anyway. But in any event. Not bad for newbies to Superman. If you just want a feel-good story that literally is from the beginning right to the literal end, but with Superman and his principles living on elsewhere in another area of the multiverse, this will be good for certainly for newbies and some longtime readers.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and I agree with you as well that the ending definitely you get that All-Star Superman feel. Plus, just the fact that he steps away from being a hero to work on a scientific solution. Obviously that's a big All-Star Superman plot thread as well. Okay, up next we have Black Adam number 8 from writer Christopher Priest. Eddie Barrows and Eber Ferreira do art on pages 1 through 7. Somebody named Montos handles the pages 8 through 22 art. Matt Herms does colors. Willie Schubert on lettering. This is sort of a flashback, giving us some of the history of Black Adam over the years as he's worked for various pharaohs, many of them sort of unworthy, honestly, to sit on the throne. and Black Adam finally getting fed up with that and taking the throne himself. And then interspersed with that is this war, this god who's in New York City and causing problems, causing conflict, and the supporting cast of Black Adam running into him, and where that's going to go and how that's all going to play out remains to be seen. But as is the case with many Christopher Priest stories, we've talked about this before, this isn't new reader friendly. It's very dense, and oftentimes you kind of have to read it all together or do multiple reads to really get the nuance of everything that's happening here. So beyond that, I don't really have much else to say. I didn't think the art was that great. Even in the beginning, for the first 8 pages, I have high expectations when Eddie Barrows does art, but this felt unfinished from him. It wasn't up to his usual standards. So don't know if there's something going on, but yeah, this was only an okay issue for me. So what did you think?
I'm going to give writer Christopher Priest some credit here. I actually did enjoy the story. This is essentially, we know from last issue that Malik, the White Adam, was basically incapacitated after he had a misadventure with Mirror Master, sort of trapped in a mirror world where he sort of met the original Teth Adam back in his origin days when he finally got out of that mirror universe, or that mirror world, that mirror dimension, but he was incapacitated, and so he's on a hospital bed, and Teth Adam is there making sure that he's all right, and he feels guilty, and the entire issue is essentially Teth Adam, Black Adam, talking to Malik, telling him that feeling guilty for that, feeling responsible for Malik's plight, and also telling him his origin, telling him some of the secrets that most people are not privy to. And the issue is called Rise. It's called East of Egypt, Book 1, Rise. The next issue will be called Fall. And he's telling the story of his rise to power. And essentially he tells the story when he was in Egypt, when he gained the power of, I guess, Shazam, but through the Egyptian gods, what greatly annoyed Teth Adam is that he had to follow the dictates of whoever the pharaoh was, and for 23 different generations he obeyed the pharaohs of Egypt, and finally he got sick and tired of the final pharaoh, who was petty and ordered him to get him grapes and get him food, and it was just he felt that he felt better than them. He felt that they were they were also corrupt. The last King Teti, I guess, he ordered him to exterminate and wipe out a bunch of women and children. So he decided essentially that he had had enough, and he basically overcame them, and he basically killed King Teti, and he became the Pharaoh of Egypt. But his reign was very short-lived for reasons which will be revealed next issue. But this is essentially Teth Adam explaining to Malik what his fall was, what his folly was, what his flaws of character were, that where he went awry and where his life took on a different path, because he feels guilty. Because remember that Teth Adam betrayed his nephew. He stole the power of Shazam from his nephew, and he became Black Adam, but he did so at the cost of, he killed it's revealed that he killed the 7 council of wizards, and he only, the one wizard, I forget what he called them here. He's the sole. There was a council of 7, and he killed 6 of them except for the wizard, who gave him his power. And he keeps the wizard in stasis. He kept the wizard in stasis because the wizard had all of his power, and that was sort of his secret. And ultimately, we know that presumably the wizard wakes up and then strips Black Adam of his power, and then banishes him or shoots him away in a star, locks him in a star somewhere, and he eventually makes it back to Earth via the origin of Captain Marvel, I would imagine, or to some effect. If I'm sounding a little bit wonky talking about this, it's because Christopher Priest never does the readers a lot of favors in terms of getting you up to speed on what came before. If I didn't have so many comics to read, I would probably have the previous issues where I could reread before I read this one. So he doesn't he doesn't help the reader a lot. There's also a couple of areas here where I don't think I don't think he got Teth Adams' dialogue well. He at one point when Black Adam is talking to Malik, he actually uses language that is not language that that Teth Adam would use. He says at one point. He says at one point. He calls. Yeah, what a jerk that guy was. And the stupid people followed him, blithely worshipped him. Teti enslaved and tortured thousands. It just, I don't see, I have a hard time seeing Teth Adam using the word jerk. And by, like, Teth Adam, I see him talking arrogantly. I see him talking I don't see him talking using teenage vernacular like he does here when he's talking to Malik. It just never worked for me in different parts of the dialogue. It just didn't work. Plus, he's Egyptian. Or he's something, something's been off with this thing from the beginning. But in any event, there was a real cool scene with an airplane where he caught an airplane crash landing in Kandak. That looked really cool. That at the beginning, I thought the art by Eddie Burrows and Eber Ferreira was pretty damn good. With that plane almost crashing and he lifts it into the air. I thought it was very well done. It'll probably look even better in the physical copy of the comic book on a double page spread as he lifts the tire of the airplane into the air, pushing the plane and avoiding it from hitting the ground. Anyways, all in all, not bad. Little hit and miss with the dialogue for me, but an interesting origin. I just wish it was a little bit more clearly told because this should be more clear. I find this is a little bit too challenging as a read at times.
Yeah, you could say that about just about any Christopher Priest book recently. Yeah, like you said, he doesn't do the readers any favor. You kind of have to work. There's worth in working to get what he's getting at. But yeah, it's not really his stories aren't really books you can sit down and relax, kind of veg out and read. They take more effort than that. So. Anyway, moving on. Batman, Superman, World's Finest, number 12 from writer Mark Waid. Manuel Lupacchino does the pencils. Wade Von Grobinger and Norm Ratman on inks. Tamara Bonvillain on colors. Steve Wands on letters. This is a date between Dick Grayson when he's Robin and Kara, Supergirl, and it goes about as well as you would expect. It's so interesting because earlier on in the run, Mark Waid hinted at a relationship for these two classic longtime DC heroes. And I kind of liked the idea. But they go on this date and through no fault of their own, they just don't really click. And so it's just fun, right? They don't click. It doesn't work out. You can't really point the finger at one or the other. But it makes sense why they're not together. And I think it really works. So this was just a heck of a lot of fun. The art by Lupacchino is solid. I didn't quite enjoy it as much as I enjoy the Dan Moore art when Moore is on the book, but it's really, really solid. And there's plenty of humorous moments in this as well. So you look at what Mark Waid did this week in Lazarus Planet Omega, really serious classic superhero work. And then you look at this, more tongue-in-cheek with these two heroes going out on a date. And yeah, I mean, Mark Waid, he just loves DC Comics as much as us fans. And give him some classic DC heroes and he's going to give you a good story, whether it's serious and topical and set in present day DC, or whether it's kind of a throwback, not necessarily a Silver Age feel, but definitely brings the humor. So all in all, this was a very enjoyable issue. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's I love when a comic book is a done in one. It's a one shot. You can just pick it up and enjoy it, and you don't need to read anything else. It's not continued. It's just you get good character moments. You get laugh out loud moments. You get some good old fashioned superhero adventuring and some humor. And it's funny because Mark Waid, we managed to get some pretty insightful moments about Dick Grayson and also about Kara. And Kara actually says what could be interpreted as maybe as a little bit of some scathing criticism of Dick Grayson, but it actually rings true. Dick Grayson does talk a lot about himself. but he's not a narcissist. He's not like that, but he's always looking for acceptance. And you can imagine a young Dick Grayson, a young Robin, is always looking for acceptance from Batman. He's always looking, saying, look what I did. I did this and then I did that. And he's always looking for approval. He's looking for approval from Bruce Wayne. And so he kind of carries that. He's inexperienced at dating. And a lot of that sort of comes through in his first date with Kara. He's sort of like, he's telling her all that he's done. And, you know, and it rubs her the wrong way because he's always talking about himself, but he doesn't intentionally want to come across like he's just sort of a know-it-all and doing that. That's just the way he is. He's young and he's still sort of figuring this out. And I think that comes through. It'd be interesting to see how the general readership will take this issue, because Kara herself, I almost get the impression she's a little bit more mature than Dick Grayson here, but maybe not. But she's arguably judgmental of Dick Grayson, but yet at the same time, she's probably a little bit, dare I say, she's probably a little bit hard on him, I would suggest. And she's, Dick Grayson's got her own criticism of him as well. They just basically just didn't hit it off. And I love how when Kara's talking with Superman is sort of like, saying, well, it's some things won't work out. And then Batman is, sort of teasing, Dick Grayson about it too. And Dick Grayson even comments at the end, it didn't work out. He asks if Talia has a younger sister. So, I mean, I thought it worked really well. I think it's a nice respite from the action that we've got in previous issues, to have this sort of issue where we could sit back and relax and just have some good humor, good fun, and get some good character work. So kudos to Mark Waid with great art by Lapacino. Lapacino, yeah, good stuff.
All right, moving on. We have Superman #1, kicking off his new series from writer Joshua Williamson. Art and colors by Jamal Campbell. Letters by Ariana Mayer. If you listen to my interview that I did with Philip Kennedy Johnson a few weeks ago, you'll know that he mentioned Lex Luthor really being a big part of what Joshua Williamson's doing in his Superman run. And so we get an idea of what exactly that means here. And basically what it means is that Lex is trying to manipulate Superman in a way that he hasn't before. Lex is in prison after the events of Superman, Son of Kal-El, and he's basically created this legal document, what have you, that says that Superman is in charge. Superman himself is in charge of Lex Industries. They call it Supercorp, and he's sort of tricking Superman into having to do it, having to be in charge. And when Superman says no, I'll turn it over to the workers, or I don't want to do it. He knows that Lex is up to something. There's language in there that if Superman doesn't, it'll all be dissolved. All these people will be out of work. So Lex has really created kind of a conundrum for Clark to have to be in charge. So it makes for an interesting dynamic. The other thing that's kind of cool that Williamson does, and he references it in the story, he talks about how there are certain people that Superman is always sort of listening for their heartbeat, listening for their voice, listening for, what they're up to. And he names them specifically: John, his son, obviously, his wife Lois, and the other one is Lex. And so as Superman is out there fighting these various threats, he fights Livewire in this issue, he fights Parasite, he's going up against these villains while Lex is, and we don't know how Lex knows that he's fighting these villains, but Lex is basically talking in his ear saying, well, you should do this, or you should do that. This is the way to take on this villain or that villain or what have you. So again, it makes for a really interesting dynamic. It's like Lex claims that there is some big threat coming, and that's why Superman needs to work with him. So what that threat is, what's going to happen, remains to be seen. But again, this is making for a really interesting story, and I thought it was fantastic. So, and the Jamal Campbell, Jamal Campbell's just a fantastic artist. So that worked for me really well as well. What were your thoughts on this, Rock?
Well, first of all, kudos to Jamal Campbell. I know that he did phenomenal work on Naomi and on Far Sector, but it's nice that he actually has his name in bigger lights with Superman, because he deserves it here. Wow, what a beautifully illustrated issue, and I got to give props to Joshua Williamson here, because I had my doubts, because the only thing Joshua Williamson has written that I've really liked in the last number of years has been his Robin run. He surprised me with Robin. I was hoping he wouldn't disappoint me with Superman, and he hasn't. This opening issue impressed me. This issue has action, romance, humor, suspense. It's kind of got it all. I'm actually impressed. Starts off with a battle against Livewire. Superman is actually listening, and as you said, he listens for certain people and Lex Luthor is one of them. And ironically, he's battling Livewire while he's listening to what Lex Luthor is saying. And Lex Luthor, for whatever reason, knows he's fighting Livewire. Luthor's trying to give him advice, and of course, Superman won't have any of it. Luthor's giving him advice that would ultimately lead to Livewire getting killed, because Luthor just likes playing with Superman that way. But that's not Superman. Superman incapacitates Livewire in his own way. He does it compassionately and with no judgment, and she's apprehended by the authorities. We then switch to the Daily Planet. Lois Lane is filling in for Perry White. Perry White's recovering from his stroke that he got when the secret identity fiasco happened. And so Lois Lane's filling in for the Planet as temporary editor-in-chief. Meanwhile, Clark Kent, talks to his wife, talks to Lois, and says, he talks about Lex Luthor. He talks about Lex Luthor being the only guy that he feels that he's failed, and that Lex Luthor is almost like the villain that he's the only villain that he feels that he's ever really given up on, and he feels maybe guilty for it. Maybe he shouldn't give up on Lex, but yet Lex is a conundrum to him. So he's always trying to get it to figure out Lex Luthor, and that's probably one of the reasons why he's always listening in on what Luthor is doing and keeping an eye on him. And Luthor has his go-to. Like you said, we got the super corporation or the what do you call it? What did he call it? Super Corp, yeah. Yeah, Super Corporation, Super Corp. Mercy Graves being sort of like advising Superman that Lex Luthor apparently has all these lawyers, and Superman is now the lead executive directing officer of Supercorp, and he's the one that can tell Supercorp what to do. Superman doesn't want the job. He's got other things to do, but Lex Luthor has handed him the reins, and apparently this is really kind of hard to believe, but we'll go with it because it's an important part of the story that apparently Lex Luthor employs so many people in Metropolis that if Superman doesn't lead Supercorp, a bunch of millions of Metropolis citizens will lose their jobs. So in a sense, it's almost like Superman is blackmailed into becoming the CEO of Supercorp. So that's very hard to believe. I mean, Lex Luthor was broke until about a year ago when he blackmailed Blockbuster and a few other supervillains to give him $1 billion. So he's not that rich. But in any event, he is Lex Luthor. And, he ends up battling then the Parasite. And there are some forces here. Somebody's controlling the Parasite that is after Lex Luthor, and as you said, Lex Luthor needs Superman to help battle a greater threat that also wants to take out Lex Luthor. That seems to be the implication here. So that's interesting. I think one of the funnier moments is when, a quick note, where Lex Luthor, the computer artificial intelligence, the AI that runs Supercorp, is actually it's a hologram of Lex Luthor, and it's quite hilarious. And Mercy says that Mr. Luthor thought it would knew part of your training to become Superman was a hologram of your birth father, Jor-El. He thought a hologram of himself might be comforting to you. So, of course, it only pisses Superman off. But anyways, I thought there were some funny moments here. And again, it was magnified and exemplified by Jamal Campbell's amazing art. And it was just, it was very well done. And I'm in for the long haul here. There's teases as to a potential future villain that looks to be maybe Brainiac at the end of it. I think Williamson took a page out of Jeff Johns in that respect, hinting at danger, horror, and adventures in the future, and even a place, even something in the Wild West. So it's going to be interesting to see what the future holds for Superman. But Joshua Williamson has got my attention.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm curious as well. It has such a different feel than Action Comics. That's what's so intriguing to me. It's been a long time since we've had two books that felt so different, starting Superman. And but what I find particularly interesting, again, I talked to PKJ about the Triangle era and his love for that, and paying respects to that and having a big supporting cast. It feels like the Superman book's going to have a big supporting cast too. I mean, we see Lois Lane now as editor in chief of the Daily Planet, so it's been a long time since a Superman book has had that supporting cast, and the Daily Planet and the people that work there and what have you have felt like supporting characters. A lot lately, it feels like the Superman books have just focused on Superman, and to a lesser extent, John Kent, and an even lesser extent, Lois, and everybody below that isn't even worth mentioning. They show up so little. So I, for one, am excited about seeing the supporting cast because those characters have been established over decades, and they've had good stories in their own right. So that's a return to a previous era or previous eras, and it's a welcome in my mind.
For sure.
All right, moving on. Teen Titans United Bloodpact #6, final issue. From writer Kevin Scott, Lucas Myers the artist, Tony Avina on colors, Carlos Emanuel on letters. Throughout, the Lucas Meyer art has been absolutely fantastic. And throughout, as Rocky and I both said, this is a very new reader-friendly book, story, what have you. Sort of the antithesis of what Priest does. You can just jump on this series and having never read any Titans or have anything to do with what's going on in the current DC continuity. You get to see the interactions, the characterizations, the relationships between these different characters, these different Titans, and it works on that level really, really. Also with the Lucas Meyer art, again, fantastic storytelling. His art style is very easy to understand. It's very classic superheroic. He breaks panels. He gives us montage pages, but the panel layouts and the page layouts flow very, very well. So again, this is a book that is really like an entry level. If you're curious, hey, am I going to like comics? Man, if you're a fan of the DC TV show that comes on HBO Max, or the Titans TV show, I should say, you definitely should be picking this up because this is that same sort of feel. As far as the story itself, yeah, it's not the most original. This whole idea of a supervillain creating an alternate reality and trapping these heroes in it, and the heroes don't even realize that the lives that they're living aren't their real lives. It's not real reality. And so again, it's not the most original, but Kevin Scott makes good use of the concept. And again, where this book really shines is in the relationships of these heroes to themselves, the camaraderie they share, the fact they depend on each other, the trust they have. Ultimately, that's what wins the day. And again, that's not the most original idea. It's sort of to be expected, but the execution of it, both narratively and visually, by Kevin Scott and Lucas Meyer, and the color work, for that matter, from Tony Avina, all of it works to really get that across, that idea. These are heroes. This is a team. They trust each other. They can't succeed alone. So I really enjoyed this. I'd be curious to see if we get more of the Titans United. We've had 2 series so far, and they've both been excellent. So what were your thoughts on this, Rock?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think the series, the sales are all that high on it, although we can say that about a lot of big 2 comic books. But this is exactly what I've enjoyed this. This is a lot of fun. And this final issue has, it is maybe a little predictable, but at the same time, it makes me feel like I'm reading classic Teen Titans, even though the membership is a little bit wonky, but I like it. And this in this issue, Beast Boy sort of betrays the team by luring them into Red Raven. Red Raven, who's been possessed by Trigon in this other sort of alternate Earth. Ultimately, her true self, her true soul self, wins the day, and they end up overcoming the mental manipulation of the Brother Blood and the villains who became the heroes of this universe. Ultimately, their mind manipulation is ended as well, and at the end of the day, it's all wrapped up in a tiny little bow. With my favorite character is Jinx. Jinx. I wish that I just liked the way she was characterized here. She was actually came across as fairly heroic, despite being often, of course, the villain. And I just thought I like how Kevin Scott he thought outside the box here, and he had a lot of fun with these characters, and he can do basically whatever he wanted with them because he was. He did that right when this first came out, this Titans United. This was not really in the mainstream DC universe. It still isn't. And to even add more fun to it, it wasn't in continuity anyway, and so he put him on yet another Earth and had all kinds of wonky fun with this. This has been a fun series, and yeah, I'd recommend that people pick it up. The art, I just love the art. I have to say, I've been buying I don't often buy alternate covers. But I've been enjoying both cover A and the cover B. I really like the cover Bs as well on this. So yeah, I would. This is a recommended for people looking for a good Teen Titans story, but they don't want to get tied down in the continuity because until Tom Taylor starts the Titans series. If you like classic Teen Titans and you want something that maybe took place after that with the same sensibilities and the same sense of fun, pick up Titans United and Titans United Bloodpact.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. Okay, up next we have Flash 793. It's from writer Jeremy Adams, pencils by Roger Cruz, inks by Wellington Diaz, colors by Luis Guerrero, letters by Rob Lee. 1 Minute War Part 4, Thunder in Your Heart. Feels like a bit of a setup issue, although we do get Wally in the Flashmobile as the Flash family starts to understand what they're up against when they're fighting the Fraction. A lot of that information comes to them from the person that Ace and Impulse rescued from the ship, the one that was being used as basically a power source. He's the one that provides a lot of information to the rest of the Flash family about who the Fraction is and how they do things. And so the Flash family, they hatch a plan they think will be able to stop the Fraction from being able to access the Speed Force and give the Flash family a big advantage. Things don't exactly go the way that they expect, which then leads to kind of a cliffhanger ending where the Flash family is not exactly in a good spot. So how they may or may not get out of this, I guess we'll have to wait and see for next issue, but the stakes continue to be raised, and it's clear that the Fraction are even more formidable than the Flash family may have given them credit for. So the Roger Cruz art, it's okay. I feel like the art here isn't as strong as the art we got from him in the Robin series. Not sure if it's just because of the schedule. This book is coming out bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks as opposed to once a month, because there's not as much detail. It's just doesn't look as finished or as polished. Storytelling's still really strong. I like the way he blocks out his panels. He moves the camera angle around a lot, so I appreciate that. But yeah, the detail in the art is just not quite there. So what are your thoughts on this?
My thought on this is that wouldn't it have been a better idea with instead of Lazarus Planet, we had the Flash 1 Minute War, and that it was the fallout of the Flash 1 Minute War and the fact that the Speed Force is catching the Earth and speeding the Earth up, and that is what leads to various humans exhibiting different kinds of metahuman powers instead of Lazarus Reign. Imagine this as in the event, because this is really the event that people are talking about, Flash 1 Minute War, and yet, unfortunately, it's not really. It's being talked about, but it doesn't really feel like it's been given the gravitas and the marketing as some of the other stuff. And yet, frankly, I'm far more interested in without exception, all of the characters that I've been introduced to in 1 Minute War. I've got more questions about, even from Avery to this new commander of the Empress, of the leader of the Fraction. I'm actually curious about these as characters and about as villains moving forward than I am for some of the characters in Lazarus Planet, and that's just because, and that's just comes down to basically the writing here. Now, to be fair, I think the writing here, I think that things. Jeremy Adams is sort of, dare I use the phrase, speeding up the narrative. I feel like this is happening fairly quickly. And I wish we'd have a little bit more. I wish maybe we could slow down. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'd like to stay in this plot point for a while to have a little bit more development in terms of all the various characters that make up the fraction. But look, I'll take what I can get here because I know Jeremy Adams is off to writing Green Lantern and he's going to probably be off Flash here. But I will say this. One of the things I talked about earlier, and it was a nitpick of mine, is that I wish I would have gotten a sense as to visually, from an artistic perspective, how everything is being sped up here. And there's a hint of it here on the very first page where Superman is saying the word what, and he's talking really slow because he's actually moving slow. So this is the first visual indication that everyone else, that they're actually moving super fast, but Superman himself is really, really slow. And even that doesn't come across very well. So I think visually, I think this whole concept could have been rethought from a visual perspective. And again, I don't know how it could have been rethought from a visual perspective, but it just should look differently than it does. And in any event, so all the heroes are basically sort of like the equivalent of being frozen, but they're not really frozen. They're just they're moving really, really slow compared to everyone else. And the whole issue is focuses on Jeremy Adams' strong points as a writer is that he's really good at character moments, and all of these character interactions between with Irie and Jesse Quick, and there's a great moment between Linda and this new character who's the organic conduit from another universe who can connect through the Speed Force. He was sort of like the human battery that Impulse and Wallace West found last issue. And the great moment between Barry and Wally, where Barry sort of breaks down and shows his insecurities, about it, his fear of losing Iris. After all, he was about to propose to her when she proposed to him. He was just starting to get his life on track when the Fraction attacked. And so the emotional stakes are really raised in this issue, which is really good. This is sort of like those emotional high points of a movie before the third act kicks in and all the action happens. That's what this issue is, and I think it works pretty well. I think Roger Cruz's art is, again, I think it's serviceable. I wish there was a different artist on this, but it still works because of the strength of the writing. And it's still, frankly, one of my top reads and must reads for DC when it comes out. Because kudos to Jeremy Adams and to Roger Cruz, too. I don't want to take anything away from the full creative team here because I'm being entertained. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think again, like selfishly, I like that it comes out every 2 weeks. Because we're getting the story quicker and it's getting Jeremy Adams a chance to write more Flash. Because like you said, he's probably going to be leaving it to concentrate on Green Lantern. I just wish Cruz had more time,
Yeah.
Because his work on the Robin series was fantastic. So, all right, moving on. We have, excuse me, DC's War of the Undead Gods, #6 from writer Tom Taylor. Pencils are by Trevor Hairsine, inks by Andy Lanning, colors by Rain Barreto, letters by Seda Timofonte. I'll let Rocky talk more about the story, but there were a couple moments that stood out for me. The very beginning when Lobo has to be convinced to save the universe by this council promising him, what does it say? Our greatest minds will turn their vast intellect to an onslaught of creative scenarios for your personal gratification. Nothing will be too depraved. And Lobo, like, reluctantly, fine, okay. That's what he wants, right? Like, he's Lobo. So, again, it's Tom Taylor showing that he has such an incredible grasp for the core of these characters. So even in the midst of this horrific story that he's telling, we get moments like that with Lobo that are humorous. And then the other moment that stood out for me, I mentioned it earlier at the top, Alfred, who's been through so much in this entire DC storyline, universe, whatever you want to call it, from Tom Taylor. He sort of has a very close personal relationship with Leslie Tompkins in this universe, like a personal and intimate one. And so when she's infected, it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And he screams out in rage, thinking about having lost his beloved Thomas and Martha Wayne way back when, and having to raise their son, the scream he never uttered then. And then to go back to more recent history in this universe where he had to kill Dick Grayson and Tim Drake and Bruce Wayne himself because they were infected with the anti-life equation. And he's, in that moment when he screams out with rage, the Spectre, having been killed earlier in the issue in his battle with Mxyzptlk, where Mxyzptlk reached into the Spectre and removed the host, what's his name? Jim
Corrigan.
Jim Corrigan. I want to say Gordon. I was like Gordon. Yeah, Jim Corrigan, and basically, the Spectre dissipated. No longer had a human host. Well, in this moment of this rage, this scream, this cry out for vengeance about the injustice, no pun intended, referencing another Tom Taylor, the first series Tom Taylor did at DC that really put his name on the map. In that moment, in that rage, Alfred Pennyworth becomes the Spectre. Is there any better? Like, I want this in the regular. Granted, if anybody were to do that now, I would hope that they would go to Tom first of all and say, "Hey, I'm inspired by what you did." It would feel a little derivative, but man, if we're going to bring Alfred Pennyworth back in the main DC universe, what better way? That's how they brought Hal Jordan back from the dead, right? But I just love this idea. I love the idea of Alfred Pennyworth as the Spectre, and obviously it works better here because what he's lost in this particular universe, in the deceased universe, is so much more than what Alfred Pennyworth. I mean, in a way, in the main DC universe, he's lost his own life, and the argument could be made that's more than this. At least this Alfred Pennyworth was still alive, but you get what I'm saying. But I just thought that was so inspired, so fantastic. I talked several comics that we've covered on this episode about how you kind of could see what's coming. Not that they were any less enjoyable for that, like Titans United, but I did not see this coming. And it was such a fantastic moment. I didn't see it coming until when he starts screaming, and he's the one that's been narrating, Alfred Pennyworth, that is. He's the one that's been narrating the entire issue. Something is coming. And then, it was at that moment when he started screaming, and I realized his text boxes were this greenish yellow throughout. And it was at that moment I was like, oh my God, he's going to become the Spectre. And yeah, sure enough, he does. So I just thought it was fantastic. What an inspired job by Tom Taylor. And the Trevor Hairsine art, like I've said throughout these deceased books, Hairsine, his style of art, like the grittiness, the fineness of the lines, the detail, it so perfectly suits this tone of the universe and the storyline that Tom Taylor's going for. And the other thing it does is it lends itself, his fine line really lends itself to the look and feel of the way characters who are infected with the anti-life equation should look, right? Like they're not clean. They're a little gritty. They're a little, there's a fineness to the line. It's hard to describe exactly, but Hairsign's artwork is perfectly suited. Like this is just this entire deceased property. He was the perfect artist. I can't imagine any other artist on this. It just wouldn't work as well. So, yeah, I thought this was just great. Like Alfred Pennyworth becoming the Spectre. That's definitely on my list for best moments for 2023 already. So what did you think about it?
Well, Lobo's a lucky bastard. If Lobo is successful in helping the heroes defeat the anti-life zombies that are destroying the universe, he gets 100 years of hedonism. And leave it to Lobo to have something to complain about 100 years of hedonism. He still figures, well, when I get bored, And they say, well, we promise we won't make it boring. Well, we'll give you a hedonistic life for 100 years, and we promise we'll be creative as possible. So that tipped the scales in Lobo. Lobo was going to help the heroes defeat the undead gods. And there's a great scene here. You talked about Alfred already, and right at the beginning, as I often do, and I think those of us who've read comics a long time, we get accustomed to when we see a narration, when we see a box of dialogue, we wonder who the narrator is. And I was wondering from the beginning here, because one of the things that happens at the beginning, it shows Superman talking to Kyle Rayner. They just witnessed the complete destruction of John Stewart's home planet, and Kilowog was killed, and John Stewart, and it was horrifying. And Superman is actually
Kilowog's home planet. You said John Stewart's home planet.
Pardon me, Kilowog's home planet. And Superman is looking at the Yellow Lantern dark side, and there's something where he goes, Clark put his anger aside in a way that I later could not. He did not lash out at what was right in front of him, and I thought, well, who's going to lash out later on? And it so perfectly ties in to that final page where, of course, it's Alfred saying this, that Superman did not give in to anger, but Alfred does at the end, and by doing so attracts the spirit of wrath to become the Spectre. So there's a really nice tie in there and a reward at the beginning of the issue that ties in nicely with the end. Works fantastic. And then in between there, you get this amazing fight that, leave it to Superman. I mean, who in the hell is going to get in the middle, in between a fight between the Spectre and an undead Mixyez-Patelik, and of course it's Superman who helps defeat Mixyez-Patelik, and ultimately the spirit of the wrath, the spirit of wrath ultimately ends up in Alfred. The new gods return. The new gods. The mother box is infected by the undead virus as well, the anti-life virus, and so because the mother box is infected, so are all the new gods. There's a battle between the new gods and the heroes, and that's epic as well. And all the other heroes we see from previous issues are infected. They're coming onto the fray, and ultimately that leads to the course of events that leads to the Spectre, Alfred becoming the Spectre. And now, unfortunately, we don't see Lobo. We don't see Lobo get in on the action in this issue. We just saw Lobo basically being sort of agreeing that he's going to help out in the battle, but we don't see him here. It just ends with Alfred becoming the Spectre. But my God, this is issue 6 of 8. I want this to be 12 issues. Only 2 issues more. I want more than 2 issues of this. I'm really enjoying this. But this comic book series has been delayed a lot. Feels like it's been a long time since the last issue. But I will say that and I know this is no excuse, but damn, if it's this good. In order to be this good, if you have to delay it another week or so, okay. This is going to read great as a trade. I have a feeling I haven't picked up all the Deceased's trades, but I think I might pick up this one, War of the Undead Gods, as a trade or as a hardcover, because I'm really enjoying this so far, and I really hope Taylor nails the landing. You're on mute there. Sorry there, Jace. You're on mute.
Yep, sorry. I want more issues just so I can see more of Alfred Pennyworth as a Spectre. I don't even care about the rest of the DC universe right now. I need an Alfred Pennyworth Spectre series, please, DC. Can I get that? Yeah. That would be awesome. So good. I mean, we did recently in the Batman Urban Legends, we had that 3-part story where Alfred was playing detective, which was really fun. So that would be so great to see him kind of do some detective work in his, in his human guise, and when necessary, Spectre out. Yeah, so good. All right, up next we have GCPD, The Blue Wall, number 5. This was from writer John Ridley. It's drawn by Stefano Raffali, colored by Brad Anderson, lettered by Josh Reed. Wow, this might be the best issue of this series so far. It's been a very political series and a very topical series, talking about police corruption and what have you. That's part of what makes it work so well, because everything that's happening in the series, you sort of understand and can believe it. And this police officer, Daniel Ortega, who seemingly out of the blue killed Montoya's brother and her brother's fiance last issue. And then you saw the clues being laid. Once that happened, once he kind of had this mental breakdown or snapped or whatever you want to say, went postal, another term, you could kind of see all along he was being radicalized. The constant hazing, and just when he thought he had a breakthrough with his colleagues at work, they set him up for even more embarrassment. That time it was in front of his father, who hasn't been a big fan of his son being a police officer, and Ortega being somebody who believed he could change the system from the inside. And then when that last moment happened, when he was embarrassed in front of his father, he just realizes in his mind, the machine, as he calls it, that is the GCPD, is just broken beyond repair. So he wants to tear it all down. It's all, again, not the most original idea, but it's all done with a lot of emotion, a lot of stakes, a lot of consequences, and a lot of emotional weight and realism from Ridley. So as much as it's at times uncomfortable, as much as at times the conversations and the interactions between characters feel uncomfortable because neither one is right, neither one is wrong. Like there's scenes where Montoya is talking with her, second in command. He's like, you need to step back. You need to, take some time for yourself. She's not willing to do that. Obviously, she's personally invested, her brother having been killed. You can see his point. You can see her point. When they're talking about this Daniel Ortega and whether or not they should have seen it coming, whether they did enough, well, if he was being hazed, why didn't he say something? Well, he did. He told any number of people. And she's like, yeah, and I told him he needed to toughen up. Like, again, you can see both sides. Like, at what point, well, that just because somebody got hazed doesn't justify murder, So again, there are no right answers. This isn't a black and white book. This isn't a book about, traditional superheroes in, hey, Superman's fighting Lex Luthor, Superman good, Lex Luthor bad. This is, much more real, much more nuanced, much more in the gray area of like police brutality and systemic issues of not just racism in police departments or law enforcement, but just systemic racism as it exists in Western civilization. There aren't any answers. If there were easy answers for this stuff, somebody would come along and solve it, right? But they're hard conversations and they're uncomfortable conversations, but they're conversations we need to have. And stories like this and fiction like this engenders starting those conversations and hopefully makes people think about how they're contributing, how they're a part of the system. Again, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. You grow up in that system and you don't even, oftentimes you're not even aware of the fact that you may be perpetuating that system. So a story like this, a comic like this can start those conversations, can help raise that awareness. So maybe you stop and think about decisions you make in your own life or, the way you do things that can contribute to that. So there's a lot of worth in that. And then when you add in the Rafali art, which is also very real and very emotional, this just blew me away. It was so good. A real page turner, and this has been a powerful series so far. I give Ridley all the credit in the world for this. There's been a few issues that were a little lighter, where we got some humorous moments here or there. This is not one of those issues where there's humor. This is all angst, and it. I was very, very impressed. So, what are your thoughts?
Oh man. I love this. I love this because this was a gut-wrenchingly painful read, and this is the type of comic where, depending on what type of comic book reader you are, you definitely don't want to read this. If politics and comics isn't your thing, don't read this. But if you like good drama, and if you're like you like police serials, and you like crime noir, man, this is right up there. And I don't think this is like. I don't think this is like shoved in your face or whatever. This is like, or this is completely unbelievable. Or, I mean, it's absolutely horrific and tragic, but this is visceral. This feels like this is character based. This is really, and this moves the characters. Wow. I mean, Renee Montoya, her brother, Benny is dead, and his fiance, Sandra, are dead. she's, let's just talk about Renee Montoya for a second. This is a woman who's gone through all kinds of types of crap with the Gotham PD. And just a call out to people out there who loved Gotham, who loved Gotham Central. I mean, this is, my God, man. This you should be reading this. This is this is an emotional sequel to that, because if anybody knows the ups and downs of dealing with the prejudices that exist within a police department, not just based on race, but also sexual orientation, it's Renee Montoya. But that's just the tip of the iceberg here. It's the small little, as you said, subtle impact that has on people's behavior and on police officers' behavior. That Danny Ortega, the young officer whose treatment by his older officers, and he was, basically fed racial epithets and basically put down and humiliated. He eventually snapped, and he he killed it. He killed he wanted to take it out against Renee, the commissioner, and he ends up killing Renee's brother and his fiance, and he's got a father who of course is almost proud of him. That's what's sad, because his father grew up to hate America, hate the prejudice, hate the people that put down his race, and his father refuses to help the police, and you can understand why. And it's quite extraordinary when you think about it. I mean, you got somebody who's done an egregious, horrible criminal act, and yet, God damn, we're sympathizing with this guy? Well, that's the power of John Ridley's writing. And, we're sympathizing with the father, even the father, Danny Ortega's father. He's kind of a piece of garbage too, and yet you can kind of sympathize with him too. What kind of life did he have? This is the true life of Gotham. You can understand that, Gotham City has its problems, but, its problems are far more significant than just the fact that the guy who dresses and cackles like a clown once in a while. It's not Batman's rogues gallery that's the problem in Gotham City. It's the life, and it's all encompassing. And there's one great scene here. There's so many great scenes. I mean, there's a scene here where a couple of issues ago, it was actually comical that Renee Montoya couldn't keep her goldfish alive, and she gave her brother Benny and Sandra, she gave him heck for getting her a dog. She goes, I can't even keep my goldfish alive. Why are you getting me a dog? And of course, she wants to give up the dog because the dog probably reminds her of her brother, but she can't, because they'll put the dog down, because nobody claims any of the dogs in the pet house or whatever the hell it is. And so she finds herself, she can't let, she's thinking of her brother. She's going to keep the dog. She has to catch this serial killer. She's got the press on her back, and she finds herself back in the bar with the same bartender that she told, look, if I ever come in here wanting a drink, don't give me a drink. The bartender gives, she goes in, she asks for a drink. And all of this comes to a head, and it culminates in the end because we finally get the return of Two-Face, where Two-Face even Two-Face feels sorry for her. He says to her, look, I feel bad for you. Just to say the word, this Danny Ortega guy will disappear. I'll do it. You won't have to, I won't say anything. I'll just do this for you. And to show the quality of Renee Montoya's character here, it's just incredible. Renee says to Two-Face, she says, if you really are reformed, Harvey, if you really are reformed, then you've got to stay reformed. If one of us has to become a monster, it has to be me. She won't even allow somebody who already knows what it's like to be a monster, namely Two-Face, Harvey Dent, to do what she feels she has to do herself. She takes responsibilities for her actions. So as far as Renee Montoya has fallen, she hasn't quite fallen hard enough that she won't abandon her own responsibilities. Now, what she's going to do, how will she handle Danny Ortega? We're going to have to wait to the next issue to find out. But man, what fantastic character work. John Ridley, we've been sort of hit and miss with him with I Am Batman, but more impressed than not. But this is so, I was so impressed this week with this issue that when we get to the pick of the week, you're not going to be surprised what I say. And it had some stiff competition this week, but
Yeah, it was tough. You know what this reminds me of a little bit when we talk about Renee, right? Like, so, we saw her go to New York City, in Ridley's other book, I Am Batman, and be offered the commissionership of the NYPD. She, ultimately turned it down. She was there both as Renee Montoya to interview for the job, also acting as the Question. Here, she's obviously choosing not to act as the Question to do her job as the commissioner. And I know you read this back in the day, Rocky. It's still one of my favorite series of all time. It's not as nuanced as this is because it's a bit of a product of its time. It was a series that came out in the 80s called Vigilante.
Yeah.
Obviously, Adrian Chase, Vigilante. A lot of people know who he is now from the Peacemaker TV show. Let me just say the Vigilante that is in the Peacemaker TV show, not that I've seen him, just from what people have told me, resembles nothing of the Vigilante in the 50-issue series from Marv Wolfman that spun out of New Teen Titans. And it was such a great, so that came out when I was like 13. I fell in love with that series. And that was really the first series. Wasn't for me, it wasn't Watchmen, it wasn't Dark Knight Returns. It was Vigilante that showed me what comics could really be in telling mature stories. And he sets aside his vigilante costume and becomes a judge and feels like morally he shouldn't be sitting on the bench while also being a vigilante, similar to what Renee Montoya is doing here. And again, the parallel that you can draw is this is a story, this is a series that can show you how mature comics can be. And obviously everybody kind of knows that now with comics being at the center of pop culture. But back in 1987, when Vigilante was coming out, people didn't. They thought of them as, funny books and kind of Silver Agey. But that's not the case, and this is fantastic. And I would put this up against, as Rocky said, any police procedural, The Wire or Homicide: Life on the Street, any of those type of real gritty, realistic TV procedurals. This is right up there in terms of quality and story. So, all right. Up next, we have Nightwing number 101. This is from writer Tom Taylor. We have a fill-in artist, Travis Moore, handles the art. Adriana Lucas on colors, Wes Abbott on letters. Ties in with Nightwing 98, where Dick rescued Blockbuster's daughter, Olivia. And we find out that Olivia's soul, apparently Blockbuster made a deal with Neron, who's sort of the Mephisto of the DC universe or the Satan of the DC universe. And Nightwing prevented Neron from getting his hands on Olivia. So Neron's back to get what's owed to him. And that's sort of what's going on here. There's also some sort of a mystery going on with who Neron gets to kind of say, hey, I can't exactly go up against these guys myself, go up against the Titans myself, because Raven's involved and she's very powerful. And obviously I don't want to piss off her father, Trigon. So he's going to get some minions, some mortals to do his dirty work, if you will. And they start off by planting this body in the rubble of Titan's Tower. We saw Titan's Tower, destroyed in the pages of Teen Titans Academy. And that sort of sets up this mystery that's moving forward. So we'll see how that plays out. There's also a backup story that follows on the Nightwing annual that came earlier last year with Dick training John Kent in how to fight, how to use his superpowers to fight, but not accidentally kill somebody by, knocking their head off. That's from writer C.S. Pocket. Eduardo Panseca is the penciler on that. Julio Ferreira on inks and Adriana Lucas on colors with Wes Abbott on letters. That was enjoyable. I think Nightwing, Dick Grayson, who's been around for 80 years, 75 years, whatever, it's such a combination I wouldn't necessarily think of, teaming him up with the John Kent version of Superman, who's only been around for like 10 years. But that combination really, really works. I mean, we're talking about the firstborn sons, technically, I mean, Dick Grayson being an adopted son, but the firstborn sons of the world's finest heroes, right? Superman and Batman. So it really works. So all in all, this was a little bit of an uneven issue for me because the main story, the Nightwing Rise of the Underworld story, it feels so different in tone than anything we've gotten from Tom Taylor on Nightwing so far, bringing in Neron and magic and more fantastical aspects of DC. Whereas the Nightwing story he's been telling up to this point, the whole run has been very grounded. So I don't know, it feels a little out of place here. I don't know, maybe he's just setting things up for his Titans run, which, may be more traditionally super heroic as opposed to Nightwing, which, very similar to Batman, is a very grounded sort of street series, basically. So, not my favorite issue, but it's good to see Travis Moore on Nightwing because his art's fantastic. and the Eduardo Penseca art is great as well in the backup story. So, what were your thoughts?
Travis Moore's art's fantastic, and wow, Blockbuster, what a piece of work. What kind of guy? I mean, isn't it amazing how the most evil, vile bastards have the most beautiful, innocent children? I mean, this Desmond child, I mean, Olivia Desmond, I mean, she's impossible not to love. She's playing, she gets to play with the Titans. She gets to play with like Beast Boy, who transforms into a unicorn, and she pretends like she's like a female King Arthur, and she's wielding a sword, and I mean, and then Starfire's playing along. I mean, she gets to play with the Titans. How cool is that? I mean, this entire issue is fun. This entire first part of this issue, and of course, it takes place after this neuron. You know, of course, he's looking for her soul, and I had to be reminded. I completely forgot that Desmond. That I didn't realize that Desmond had done that Blockbuster had sold the soul of his daughter. I mean, what a piece of work. But I mean, what an interesting story that can now be told, because it's interesting because now Neuron, of all people, he apparently, there was a villain that has taken over the soul of the king of Vlatava, and apparently whoever this presumably this soul, the king of Vlatava, the real king of Vlatava, was killed a number of months ago, and his body was, I guess, was replaced by some bad guy's soul that Neuron has, and now Neuron is going to the king of Vlatavia because he wants to somehow manipulate events in order to get the soul of young Olivia Desmond, and ultimately. Amanda Waller shows up because what they discover, and there's actually some decent character moments here, because Starfire and the Titans themselves are quite upset to learn that there's another body that's buried under the ruins of Titan's Tower, because they had the big battle there with Dark Crisis. And not all the bodies, apparently all of the bodies have been found except for one, and they've located a body under the rubble, and so they go to retrieve the body, only to discover that they're expecting it to be one of their students. And so it's actually some good emotional moments there that you know, it's like Marines, you know, recovering one of their own. They, you know, the Titans want to be there to recover the body of one of their students. And it ends up being, of all things, the king of Vlatavia, and they end up going to Vlatavia, where Nightwing discovers that the real king of Vlatavia has been dead for a few weeks already. So something is awry, something's up, and somebody knocks out Nightwing and takes his place at the end of the issue. So we don't know exactly who that might be, but that now we have an imposter Nightwing infiltrating the Titans, and so it's really curious to see where this is going to go. But I'm intrigued. I like this detour from the story. It was unexpected, and I like it. Now, those of us who would like some more action on the heart. What is it? The Heartbreak? What's the villain's name? Heartless, the Heartless villain, yeah. Right? A lot of people are complaining where's Heartless, and clearly Tom Taylor is playing it slow with Heartless. That might be for something we might have to wait for issue 125, but on the pacing of this. But frankly, I'm enjoying. You know, if it's storytelling like this, I mean. Like I say, I'm enjoying this, and I've said this before. I'm sounding like a broken record. I know the plotting on this sometimes leaves much. It's not like particularly sophisticated plotting, but damn, there's always enough moments and fun moments that the plotting is enough, and it's more than made up for with the character moments, that it keeps drawing me back into the story. And as for the backup, I don't have much to say for the backup. I feel it's kind of. I don't know why we need two stories here. A story of Dick Grayson training John Kent. I guess it's okay. I don't mind it. You know, A Night at the Circus seems a little bit derivative that we get. I didn't even know there was circuses anymore, and they end up at a circus rescuing somebody who is practically. It's almost identical to like a young Dick Grayson, and they end up saving some trapeze kids from being, you know, with the rope being cut. It's almost like it's so reminiscent of Dick Grayson's origins. It's so close to the chest. It feels extremely tropey and a little bit, you know, dare I say, maybe not as original as I would have thought, but Yeah, it's not bad, but I like the main story. I wish they wouldn't have a backup. I would just like more focus on the main story myself. But overall, it's still a pretty good issue.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of the. I mean, I liked the dynamic between Dick and John. You're right. The setup for them is completely derivative. Feels completely derivative. But yeah, even though I enjoy that interaction between these two, the sons of the world's finest, as it were. If I had my preference, if you want to do this, then do a one shot so I can buy it if I want. I don't have to if I don't. Yeah, I'm still not a fan of the backups in these DC books. So, and as far as who that might be that knocked out Nightwing, who is it that Neron has recruited? All we know is the Grinning Man, right? That's what we're told coming
Right.
next issue, the Grinning Man, and he does have a Nightwing even asks when she, whoever it is doing the autopsy. Why are you smiling? Oh, I love a mystery. Can't help but grin. And then later knocks out Nightwing, takes his form, walking into the portal with the other Titans. And yeah, still can't keep that grin off their face. So, okay, up next we have Wonder Woman number 796. Michael W. Conrad and Becky Cloonan are the writers. Amin K. Nahalapan on art. Jordi Belair on colors. Pat Brosso on letters. It does have a backup as it does. We're not going to talk about it other than to say it has it. The young Diana backup. You guys all know how we feel about it. The tone of these is just wildly disparate. Shouldn't be in there. We're not going to talk about any of the backup. But it is written by Jordi Belair, art by Paulina Ganeshow, colors by Kendall Good, and letters by Becca Carey. But the main story, it's actually interesting in terms of there's some big events that happen here. Not least of which at the end when Hera kills Zeus. Well, Hera sets Zeus up to be killed by the Wizard Shazam of all people. So turning the Wizard Shazam into, I mean, it used to be the Wizard Shazam was like this benevolent old white guy who gave Billy Batson his powers, and over the years he's morphed. Now he's a person of color, which makes more sense, coming from the Middle East, obviously. But for him to kill Zeus, I mean, we're talking out and out villainy here, along with Hera and her manipulations and her machinations and whatnot. So really leaning into this idea of the gods as they appear, petty with all the infighting and what have you, and like classic Greek literature. But for the Wizard Shazam to stab Zeus in the back, that I didn't see that coming. So that was really interesting to me. So whether or not that is going to have long-term consequences, whether or not it's going to stick, I guess we'll still have to wait and see. So that was kind of the big takeaway for me in this issue. Other than there's just some great moments. So I know we've been hard on Clunrad at times for kind of the pacing, what have you, but this I feel is one of their stronger issues, just in terms of some great moments, some great action. Seeing Yara Floor cut off Eros's hand was great. He's holding her out the side of a building and wants to drop her, but just can't, because supposedly he has actual feelings for her. And she's like, "Oh, I'll do it for you." And she pulls out his own dagger and chops off his hand. So that was a crazy moment. And then as Eros is standing there, trying to staunch the bleeding with his cloak, here comes Wonder Woman and just with a big crash and flies right into the building and sends him flying out the other side. So again, I mean, as hard as we've been on Clunrad at times, this is action packed, and this had some really, really great moments. And it was really enjoyable in terms of story structure and those enjoyable moments and what have you. All that being said, I've said many times when it comes to Wonder Woman, the whole God aspect of her is the least interesting thing to me. I don't go in for Greek mythology. It's just I spent too much time immersed in it in college, and I'm over it, frankly, and I don't want to have anything to do with it, because much like magic, which is also tied up in this, any of these gods can do anything at any time for any reason. Like, and if you want to have like, well, why did they do that? What's their motive? Well, because they're gods and they're fickle and they'll just do anything to because they're bored and they're immortal and they do whatever. There's no predicting it. And so it can lead to lazy writing in my mind. Which, like I said, having the wizard Shazam stab Zeus in the back. So you could look at it one of two ways. Well, that's really interesting, or it's so arbitrary and capricious. It certainly fits in with our history and what we know of the gods and, all the fictions and myths and what have you. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. But again, you can't necessarily see it coming. You can think of that as a good thing. You can think of that as a bad thing because anything can happen at any time and doesn't matter because it's all going to get undone anyway. So I'm of two minds about it, but for the most part, this was enjoyable because there was a ton of action. I thought the art was really strong and there were some really great moments. So yeah, I'm curious to know your thoughts. I know you're more of a fan of Wonder Woman and the gods aspect of it. So what do you think?
Well, I'm a fan of Wonder Woman. I'm not a fan of her gods, and you alluded to it. If the gods were at least written consistently, or at least were treated like the terrorists and the villains that they were, and if Wonder Woman wasn't repeatedly humiliated by suggesting that she would worship these morons and idiots who even under Clunrad's scripts are depicting Zeus as eating grapes and being frivolous, and then Hera herself, and anyways, but I digress. Clunrad's all Wonder Woman writers are basically, I guess they're cursed to have to try to make sense of that nonsense. But religion in comic books and mythology in comic books is always a tricky thing. Although I will say, for what it's worth, I think Marvel does it with Thor better than anyone. You don't see Thor going around getting on his hands and knees worshiping a bunch of gods. If they piss him off, he kicks them and he'll kill them if he has to. Wonder Woman, of course, doesn't seem to want to do that. But kudos to Yara Flor here for at least cutting off the hand of Eros, which is interesting because I don't think Yara Flor has killed anybody yet. But I don't even think I've seen Yara Flor be violent yet, let alone kill anybody. Yet here she's cutting off the hand of Eros, her former lover, which I think, wow, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, especially if you're Yara Flor. But Eros here, he's dropping love bombs, and I'm saying that, and I'm being literal. He's dropping love bombs here, and the whole city streets, they're just like swarming Wonder Woman, and the narration here really tries to make Eros so powerful. I mean, I actually thought it was kind of comical. Eros weaponizes love, and Eros and gods fear him above all others. And I'm thinking to myself, really? Is that really true? Do the gods really fear Eros above all others? I don't think they do. I mean, how many people really fear the god of love? The god of love, the guy who's shooting hearts. I don't think they fear him all that much. But whatever, I'll let that go. But I do. What's interesting here is the many shortcomings that we got in the Wonder Girl series. We got some of the attempt to sort of put lipstick on the pig here, because there's been a much needed conversation between Yara Flor and Eros, because Eros, of course, manipulated Yara Flor, I guess, arguably. Yara Flor was, you could say, seduced by him, or at least felt it was in a relationship with Eros, and that went awry. And of course, he basically wants her to, he invites her to Olympus with him to come join me and Hera. We're going to get all the people on the planet. We're going to force them to worship us, and then we're going to get all powerful. My problem with the storyline and the plot line in general is that it's very tropey. This has been done so many times before. More specifically, who cares? Like, and I'm not trying to be a jerk when I say that, but just bear with me. Okay, so everybody worships the Greek gods again. If tomorrow everybody worshiped the Greek gods in the DC universe, how does that make them more powerful? Okay, so then they're more powerful. Then what, Hera? Then what? If Hera just wanted to be king of the gods or queen of the gods, well, okay, you got the wizard who killed Zeus at the end of this issue. Why don't you just have your queen? You're queen of the gods now. So who cares if you're worshipped? I mean, I don't understand where this, how is this power channeled from all this worship? And is it really worship if you're forcing people to worship you? isn't that kind of defeating the purpose? Isn't that the total opposite of worship? The whole thing just seems wonky to me. So I don't understand the motivation that Hera has here. Now, just some backup here, I got to say. In Lazarus Planet, we once were gods one shot that came out 2 weeks ago. That's Lazarus Planet. We were once gods one shot. In the story by Josie Campbell called the price of eternity. In that issue, the wizard, the Rock of Eternity, ends up being encapsulated in young Billy Batson, and that cut off the wizard from his power. So the wizard doesn't have all his power because it's in the Rock of Eternity, which is somehow within the soul of Billy Batson, and it's in that issue where the wizard states that it's the reigns of Lazarus have shown me the way. So it's reasonable to conclude, based on his comments in Lazarus Planet, that the wizard here has been infected by the Lazarus reign, and that's what's caused him to maybe become this evil version of himself and caused him to literally, it would appear, murder Zeus. And what's interesting is I'm not sure what Hera's plans were, because presumably it just rained a couple days ago, or just finished raining. So I don't think she ever had the wizard on her side prior to that. So I'd be curious to know what Hera's plan was before the wizard suddenly showed up, and what prompted him to go to the Greek gods. But hopefully that'll be explained in Lazarus War of the Gods, which is or Revenge of the Gods, which is coming up. So I am intrigued. I am more intrigued now, finally, with a Wonder Woman isk storyline that I've ever have been in recent memory. So this was called Before the Storm. So I am intrigued with this. I want to see where it's going. I've got all kinds of issues with the gods and what have you. I mean, bear in mind, Wonder Woman is to blame for half of this. She, for nonsensically, decided to resurrect them for reasons which made no sense. I mean, I don't know. She resurrects them, and then she wonders why they act like they've always acted. Like, really? I mean, come on. Like, that's sort of like having kids and then wonder why they act like kids. I mean, that kind of goes with the territory, but whatever. And then also,
it always makes me think, when Wonder Woman complains about how the gods act, it always makes me think of that line in it's some classic horror movie. I can't remember which one it is, where they say, "The call's coming from inside the house." Wonder Woman, the call's coming from inside the house. What did you expect?
Exactly. And I should say there's another wild card here, and that is Hippolyta. Hippolyta is now a god herself, and she's a god on Olympus, and so Hippolyta presumably is trying to fight against the machinations of Hera. And is Hippolyta aware that the wizard is now involved? So hopefully we'll see Hippolyta's actions, or see what her involvement is as this story moves forward. But overall, this is one of the more intriguing Wonder Woman issues that I've seen in a while. And I hope something comes of the storyline with Revenge of the Gods. And we'll see. I still got some issues with Wonder Woman, but this was one of the better issues. So I will give Clunrad some credit there, and I really did enjoy the art by Amankei Nahulpan and Jodie Beller in the colors.
Recently we saw that Hippolyta had a chance to be resurrected and chose to stay with the gods to fight on behalf of her daughter. Well, she's kind of dropped the ball based on everything Diana's been going through lately. So, all right. Last book we're going to talk about in detail is Catwoman number 52. It's from writer Tinny Howard, Sammy Basri on art, Vicente Fuentes does the inks, Veronica Gandini on colors, and Lucas Gattoni on letters. This one really focuses on Dario and what's her first name?
Iko.
Iko Hasegawa.
Yeah.
Even to the point where Iko is invited back into that group of 5 crime families, along with Black Mask, and she's talking to Dario, and she's like, "Oh, they invited the cat in. They don't realize that Iko is Catwoman right now, with Selena Kyle being in prison." So half the story focuses on that. The other half of the story focuses on Selena and what she's trying to build, this team that she's trying to build. For what reasons, we don't know. But while she's in prison, she's recruiting other criminals, and she's still taking the death of Valmont very, very hard. even to the point where she argues with her lawyer that it's her fault. Lawyer's like, no, it's clear based on their bodies that these people were killed in the blast, and blaming it all on Punchline for setting the explosive at Ace Chemicals. And for whatever reason, Selena, she just has that guilt trip where she wants to take responsibility for it. So I have a feeling that it's a little bit of an act, but what doesn't necessarily make sense is why she's putting that act on even when she's just narrating for us. So maybe it's not an act. Maybe she really does feel that she, is responsible to some extent. So if that's the case, what exactly is she planning? Because part of it feels like, she's allowed herself to be captured and go to prison, go to Blackgate as a punishment, as a penance. Maybe she's setting something up for after, when she feels like she's, served her time basically, or made up for what she did wrong. So it's intriguing. It's intriguing. The art by Basri, I thought it's not his best. It felt not necessarily rushed, but it just didn't feel as dynamic as his art has for me in the past. Everything kind of felt like medium distance, everything's like a medium setup shot. There wasn't really anything like visually to grab you. The storytelling is fine, and the characterization, again, fine. But I mean, I've seen Basri do some fantastic art in the past. This just wasn't quite that. So maybe it's just a matter of him finding his footing on these characters. I mean, with the exception of, there's one scene where Iko and Dario and his Tomcat persona are kind of jumping down toward us, jumping down on the page. Other than that, everything was kind of paint by the numbers from an artwork perspective. But yeah, a little bit of a setup issue. Curious to see where it's headed. I do feel like from those kind of uneven pace issues that we had in the beginning from Tinny, feels like she's finding her footing. Because that was another thing. I thought that the pacing in this one was excellent, very consistent. So what were your thoughts on it?
Well, I think I agree with you when you were I think posing a question, and that is, is something else going on here with Selena? There is clearly the lawyer that shows up tells Selena, like, there's literally no evidence that you killed Valmont. I mean, the evidence would suggest the explosion killed Valmont. She says to her, it seems clear that the explosion killed them both. And then Selena says, you weren't there. And she says the explosion wasn't your fault. So the lawyer's basically telling her that, look, you're going to get off here. And we got to remember that Selena earlier had refused, like, Bruce's lawyers, because I mean, Bruce Wayne could give her the top lawyers that she needs. And so then the question, I mean, why is she there? And so it's quite clear, at least I think it's clear, that she's there to recruit members recruit a new crew, and that's exactly what she's done here. She's in jail on purpose. She's actively resisting her lawyer telling her that I can get you out of here. I mean, it's ridiculous, unless Selena has the plan of recruiting a lot of the people that are in this her cellmates. And in fact, she actually knows quite a bit about them. So it's obvious, it becomes clear in this issue that Selena knows much more about her cellmates and her fellow prisoners than she let on. She knows that some of them are metahumans. She knows some of their skill sets. And so she's there and she's actually teaching them. She wants to teach them how to steal, how to get away with things, how to do things. And I guess prison is a good training ground for that. If you're the world's greatest thief and you want to train other thieves, what better training ground than a top security prison where you're being tested every single day? And that maybe is Selena's thinking. And then once that training is complete, because Selena was even put in solitary confinement in this issue, and she literally escaped to go train her fellow prisoners. And so clearly she could escape at any time, and she could be released at any time by the words of her own lawyer. So clearly she's got an agenda of being there to recruit others. Maybe we talk a lot about a Batman family. Maybe we're going to be getting a Catwoman family. and that this is the beginning of a Catwoman family that seems to be the new norm. You know, we got Batman family, Spider-Man family, Iron. Every hero has a family. Catwoman needs more of a family. Catwoman has her alley cats in Gotham City. Maybe she just wants to have her own group of thieves that are unique unto her own. And maybe that's what this. Maybe this ultimately is what Tini Howard is going to set up, or is trying to set up. And while I think that is the case, the way that Tini Howard has gone about it here, I think it lacks a little bit of verisimilitude, and it's a little bit wonky. We'll see how she nails the landing on the story arc, or maybe I've read this completely wrong. I'd be curious to know what other people think about that. But I'm really curious to see how this is all going to end up with Tomcat and Eco as Catwoman, and because ultimately at some point Selena is going to be released, and so what's going to happen then? So, anyways, I'm very interested to see how this is going to end.
Yeah, I'm been up and down with Catwoman during the Tini Howard run, but yeah, this is definitely a issue that's on the upswing. So, all right, well, that's the last single issue we're going to talk about in detail. There is one other single issue out this week. Harley Quinn, the animated series Legion of Bats, #5 is out. Then in terms of collected editions, at DC, we have Detective Comics Volume 1, The Neighborhood trade paperback. So this is starting to collect the Mariko Tamaki run. This particular issue or collection collects Detective Comics 1034 through 39. That's where we get introduced to Mr. Worth after his daughter is killed, and this whole idea of the parasite and what have you, Mayor Nakano, and all the anti-vigilante sentiment that's running through Gotham. So it was a pretty strong story. Dan Mora does the art, so that's definitely a plus. There's also the Joker Volume 3. This finishes up the Joker series from James Tynion, Giuseppe Camuncoli art, so that's issues 10 through 15. And then there's also a Justice League International Omnibus Volume 1 hardcover. So this is collecting the stuff from Justice League International way back in the 90s with obviously DeMatteis and Giffen and Kevin Maguire. So you've got Justice League, that Justice League series that spun out of Legends, issues 1 through 6, Justice League International, which is what it became, Maxwell Lord won't have you, 7 through 25, Justice League America 26 through 30. That was when they had 2 books. They had Justice League America and Justice League International. Justice League Annual 1, Justice League International 2 and 3, Justice League Europe 1 through 6, and Suicide Squad 13. So that is classic stuff. If you're a fan, you want an omnibus form, it's out this week. And then finally, the Birds of Prey, the 90s series that ran for over 100 issues, has a trade paperback coming out that collects the end of the series. So that's issues 113 through 127. So all of those are out this week if you're looking for collections. In the meantime, getting back to current books, we think we know what your pick is for book of the week, DC, Rocky, but you want to make it official?
Well, yeah, and I'm thinking about it. I'm so torn because I love 2 of them. I loved the Clayface issue, Batman One Bad Day Clayface. But you know what? I'm going to give it to John Ridley because I think the guy's faced an uphill battle with DC on multiple levels. So I'm going to have to go with GCPD, The Blue Wall, #5.
Yeah, so I think I probably would give my nod to that as well if you hadn't picked it. But since you picked it, I'll pick something else. I'm going to go with Deceased. Again, just on the strength of those character moments that Tom Taylor gives us with Lobo at the beginning. So humorous, the poignant moments with Superman and Kyle Rayner talking about the death of Jon Stewart and Kilowog's whole planet. And then obviously the moment of the year for me so far, Alfred Pennyworth becoming Spectre. That was so good. That was like a holy shit moment for me. So I'll give my nod to Tom Taylor, Trevor Hairsine, and the whole creative team for Deceased War of the Undead Gods. So that's going to do it. Got anything you want to tease coming up this week?
Well, I have my indie Indie review this week with Jason of the Get Fresh crew at Weird Science. We're going to be reviewing a number of mostly Image comics this week. I think Art Brute #3 and Nightclub #3 as well, and probably 2 or 3 others. We'll see. So that'll come out in the next few days. What about yourself?
Yeah, so have another creator-owned spotlight for Zoop coming up sometime later this week. Had one last week for an adult-oriented magic horror romance called Magic Necklace that's out there if you want to listen to it. Yeah, trying to get back on track, get more content out. Just been so busy with other things, travel and whatnot, but hoping to get more content out for you guys soon. I haven't even been able to do the New Comic Wednesdays for the last few weeks. Not only because Marvel's been coming in exceptionally late, but I'm so far behind on my reading. And it's like once you fall behind, trying to get caught up is that much harder. So anyway, but we appreciate, as always, you guys listening. If you are listening to audio only and you haven't gone and subscribed to Rocky's channel on YouTube, where you can see our smiling faces and check out the artwork as we talk about this, please do so. You know what to do when you go to YouTube. Subscribe, ring the notification bell, leave comments, like the video, all that sort of stuff. Conversely, if you stumbled across this on YouTube and you're curious about the other content we put out on the Comic Source audio only, just go to wherever you get your podcast, do a search for the Comic Source, and subscribe. So that's going to do it for this episode. Hope you guys all enjoyed the DC books this week, and we'll talk to you next time.
Catch you later.